and get started if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, this is the first public hearing that public meeting that we're having tonight. Workshop is something who's coming up is Panacea Waterfronts Panacea Incorporation to the city, and Mark Mitchell will be making the presentation. I'm assuming for the city or for the proposed city, realize everyone that no decisions are made here. The board will not vote on up or down. Either way, there will not be any type of formal votes tonight. It's for discussion purposes and to kind of get a general consensus of how the banter back and forth and get a general consensus as to how to move forward. So with that, Mark.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Howdy.
It's going to be kind of repetitive to a couple of you that were at our meeting the other night. Kind of bear with me, and I'm going to skip over some of it. But first of all, I want to go over the timeline of how we got started on this situation. Prior to 2009, a lot of the citizens were talking about maybe we wanted to become a city. And we didn't think it was possible because back then there was a criteria that you had to have a certain level of population before you could even be discussed or bring it to the legislature. And they've bypassed a lot of those guidelines, and we are to the size that we can become a city. And in 2009, then Commissioner Alan Brock approached some of the citizens and asked us why we were not incorporated and stated that he would like to see us move forward. And that's when we started getting this initiative going. 2010 and 11, we began collecting information for a feasibility study. And we started working with Tom Hawkins, who is a city commissioner in Gainesville, an attorney. And we worked with the University of Florida Law School, and they put together a feasibility study for us. And we've turned that feasibility study into the Florida legislature. And we had to reach certain deadlines to met those deadlines, and our legislators now have it and waiting on us to move forward with it. These steps were all had to be done before we could even come talk to you guys. So why do we want to incorporate? We want to provide greater local control. We would like to be in control of our destiny. We understand that Wakulla County is not a very rich county. We don't have a lot of money to spend on beautification and upgrades. And we think that if we can become a city, we can go after both federal and state grants and then give us the ability to upgrade our sidewalk system, which we have none, and do some other things like the city of St. Mark's and the city of Sopchoppy have done. Panacea, y'all know, is kind of separated from the rest of the county. We're down in the south end, we've got the refuge between us, and we've got the bay on the other side. And we're kind of down there as the black sheep. And we feel like moving forward as a city will give us the opportunity to put some things together to make us look better. We would be the gateway to the Gulf. Everybody that comes into Wakulla County from the south will go right through Panacea. And we can beautify Panacea and make it better, not just for Panacea, but for the county. Give us a better picture when people come into the county. If we do get to become a city, our government will consist of 5 commissioners, which will be elected every 4 years. We will have a mayor who will just be have no independent powers and will be elected by the 5 commissioners. We'll have a city manager and a city attorney. We'll have a contract with the county for key services like law enforcement, fire protection, and other vital services. There will be no changes in the water and sewer and electrical and solid waste. That's where you guys come in. We'll be in an intergovernmental relationship with y'all just like the city of St. Mark's and the city of Sopchoppy. We've got a bunch of numbers down here, and these all came from the feasibility study. And we have solicited an attorney, and Mr. John Moyle, who is here tonight, if you have any questions. And we've been working with the county manager to try to put together something that we thought that y'all could work with and that we could work with, and try to make this thing work. This is really, really important. We've got a wonderful place in Panacea, and right now it's just stagnant. It's dead end. We don't have any way to go. We don't any direction. And we want to be able to move forward as a city and bring in new businesses and new visitors and just help the county and the city. We've got a couple of quotes from some of the people. Randall Taylor, who is with the Sheriff's Department and lives in Panacea, says that he wants us to become a city because then, like I said earlier, we would be in control of our own destiny. Incorporating was really good for St. Mark's. Panacea likewise will benefit from being incorporated. That's coming from Zoe Manfield, who is the city manager over at St. Mark's. Dr. Gene Carbonat, who used to have his practice in Panacea, originally started this, trying to get some of this going several years ago. And I saw him at church this past Sunday, and he said he's so proud of us finally taking this action and moving forward. And we look forward to having a continued relationship with the county. Hopefully this can be a partnership where we can work together with you guys and just have a wonderful place for Panacea and for Wakulla County. And that concludes my presentation.
So this whole thing was started by a suggestion from Alan Brock, one commissioner. Was there any board direction at all? Or
No, sir.
Okay. I mean, you didn't need Alan's.
Oh, no, no.
Go ahead, but I mean, it's listed as one of the key things.
Well, that was just a quote that he gave us.
I have a question, if you don't mind, on the revenue side. What is the $64,000 a year in franchise fees on the revenue side?
John, can you help us with that?
Sure. Hi, I am John Moyle. I'm a lawyer and have been helping the folks in Panacea who want to push forward with this incorporation effort. So the franchise fee issue relates to an anticipated fee that we think will be forthcoming from used to be Progress Energy, now it's Duke Energy, but they in cities to use the right-of-way, as I understand it, typically pay a franchise fee to the host local government, and it's contemplated that would be the franchise fee, the lion's share of the franchise fee.
So that's not something we charge right now, but something you have the authority.
No, but the problem with that is a pass-through. So at the end of the day, the customer does pay that fee.
Okay, I understand.
It's a
But
pass-through.
I was just wondering.
That's the
what it
reason
was.
we don't charge that.
Yeah. Sop Choppy also has franchise fees. That's part of their budget.
Right.
For right-of-ways on.
For different things.
And the PST, public service tax, and the communication service tax, you're assuming you're going to get all those taxes that are paid by the citizens of Panacea, those will go to the city of Panacea, like they do with Sop Choppy and St. Mark's, but the county will still provide all the same services they do now.
Well, I guess a couple of thoughts in response to that question is, I think some people are saying, well, if we move forward with this, why treat Panacea differently than you treat Sop Choppy and St. Mark's? I mean, it seems that
Well,
if they're similarly
they were incorporated
situated.
a couple hundred years ago, is why.
Well,
Go ahead.
so there's a historical argument, but anyway, so some people are suggesting that similarly situated entities should be treated the same. That's an argument, but we've also said, we understand economics are part of this, and want to try to see if we can't fashion a situation where it's a win-win We're not necessarily saying, you know, you got to have every piece of that revenue, but I think as has been done, and I've talked to some folks at the League of Cities. I've knocked around state government for a long time, and you know, people have said oftentimes counties will work with cities to kind of get them up and run and help through interlocal agreements and other things. So we're open to working with you with respect to discussions on finances and things like that. And I've had some conversations with your staff and others on that.
Howard?
Yeah, can you go over that $65,000 and just walk me through what you were looking at and what page you are on?
Right on Table 1 on the 5-year projected revenue on the...
Yep.
Do you see the net discretionary state revenue sharing? I'm sorry. Right here, Howard. See what it says year?
Yep,
Go down to franchise fees.
yep,
$64,000 every year.
right. And so I want to understand that when our county administrator says this is a pass-through. Well, can you explain so I can understand?
It's charged by the utilities, but the utilities will add that to their customer bills, and then then it's much like the PST tax. It'll be charged back and then given back to the community.
So right now, do we receive those fees?
No, we do not.
So how is this, so I'm not understanding.
They
how-
have, if they're incorporated, they have the legal authority similar to what Choppy does
Well-
to charge that fee.
And
Only in the city limits.
So this would be an additional
It's a
$64,000 that the
It's
citizens...
it's a negotiated fee with the utility.
Utility. But what I want to understand, that this is a new fee that the citizens of Panacea will be
Yes.
paying. It's a
Correct.
new fee or tax, or
That's a
call it
new
whatever
fee.
you like.
That's
This
correct.
$64,000 is not coming out of the air, it's coming out of the pockets of the people in Panacea.
Correct.
Okay.
And I
The
wanna-
other question I have is there was mention that before there was a population requirement, and I remember that because Crawfordville didn't meet the population requirement, and now Panacea meets the population requirement. What is that population requirement that Panacea now meets?
It's in the Florida statute, it's been there for years about a population requirement, but in the last 4 or 5 years, the legislature has waived the population figures. There's been several communities that the Florida legislature entered a charter to that did not meet the population requirements. That's one of the things they can waive.
So what is the actual, do we have that
I think it's
as part of this?
I think it's 1,500 people as a minimum is what they suggest. The League of Cities, you know, commented, they were at the workshop recently and said over in marine land, over I think it's in Flagler County, you know, they got 3 people in there. That's not ideal, but they said to the local control issue, the county wouldn't put up a speed limit in marine land, and people were zipping through there, so they incorporated for the purposes of setting a speed limit. So it varies. The legislature can waive it. I think it's 1,500 is the suggested amount.
Well,
Neither Sop Choppy nor St. Mark's meets that presently, and I think Panacea would be significantly sized compared to those 2 cities.
well, I'm not understanding. A few years back, when I looked at with the citizens of Crawfordville to get the citizens of Crawfordville looking at incorporation, we were told in no uncertain terms that Crawfordville did not have the population needed to walk down this path. Now, all of a sudden, you said an incorporation of a municipality of 3 people? Did you say that?
That's right.
3 people can be established as a city? I mean, so the population figure then becomes a joke.
Well, I mean, you know, the legislature has the ability to pass laws. Just because the legislature from 1995 said, you know, you got to have 1,500, doesn't mean the legislature from 2013 can't say, well, we'll make an exception, particularly when you look at the situation in your county. I mean, you all have 2 other incorporated areas that, you know, I think have smaller populations than the proposed Panacea. So, you know, from my perspective, it's not inconsistent with the facts on the ground.
Well, I guess I'm able to provide a lot of insight on this from serving over 7 years as Sop Choppy City Commissioner before this, and I know I had looked at the numbers one time, and there's if I want to remember right, there's around 410. I know there's over 400 municipalities in Florida. over 100 of those municipalities have populations of less than 1,000. But a lot of those was like Sopchoppy and St. Mark's that were incorporated 100 years ago. And I think one reason that they set that population requirement is so in the future, you know, for different things, like you got 2 egg in different places like that. But I know they do waive it. But I wanted to speak on the, well, before I say anything, I just want to make it known that I am supportive of Panacea's efforts in incorporating. I am supportive of their efforts in wanting to have local control. You know, I believe that's important. But there are some misconceptions, and there's some things that we have to deal with the reality too, and some questions that I have that as we go through this, maybe I can answer or ask. One thing, it was mentioned about the franchise fee. We're living inside the city limits where I live now. Every month whenever I get my power bill, I can look on my power bill, and there's an itemized line on there that says how much of that is franchise fee going to the municipality, so I can look each month. I think mine winds up being $20, $25, or $30 a month of my bill, specifically.
How high?
Huh?
That high?
Yeah.
It's that high.
Yeah, about $25 or $30. My light bill is about $25 or $30 higher than it would be if I lived outside the city limits. So living inside, and that money directly goes to Sopchoppy. That's the pass-through that is being referred to. It's not coming from the county. It's directly, it's collected from the consumer, and then the Progress Energy, that money gets redirected back around to Sopchoppy of that money. Now, Sopchoppy doesn't have an ad valorem tax, but Sopchoppy also has a water system that's a budget of around $1.5 million. And a lot of things that's when I said the misconception that of maybe being displayed here. There's a lot of things that Sopchoppy has done through the years, but it done because it had the asset of the water. And another thing that I was hoping to maybe get an answer on the numbers. Give an example also. It was before I left the city commission that we went and we got a community block development grant of around $650,000 for stormwater. But in order to get that grant, we had to spend over close to $50,000 of our own money that we weren't going to get back and weren't going to be reimbursed in order to have it engineered. And that's just with that grant. If we whenever we go to do phase 2, which we already did the engineering for phase 1 and phase 2 to begin with, but that's just for that grant. But there's been many other grants, and what I was wondering if y'all could, out of your numbers, say if you went after a community block development grant or you went after some of those grants, and you had to spend the upfront money, that much upfront money, where was that money going to come from out of the budget here? Because that's a very real figure that will have to be met.
So I guess let me take a crack and then turn it over to Mark. But on what you described with the CDBG block grant, I mean that's a pretty good deal. It sounds like you're spending 7%, and the rest is coming from somewhere else. And my contemplation is just like you all put together a budget and look at your sources and uses, that to the extent that there is an opportunity to draw down funds, whether they be state or federal funds like you described, you know, that I think in a budgeting process you would look at it and say, well, wait a minute, you know, if we can get a return on this, then we may need to, you know, not try to work something out with the city manager, reduce that fee, or you know, just like you would at your kitchen table, go through a budgeting process and make some adjustments.
I think it would be a real asset for Panacea to be able to go after community block development grants and many things, but, you know, like I said, a lot of those have the upfront cost that'll have to be met, and I just was wondering where the money was going to come from for that, in addition to everything else.
You know, the study that was put forward by the folks down in Gainesville, you know, has a list of all of the potential, you know, revenue sources that are out there. And we've had a little bit of discussion about some of them, the franchise fee, the communication services tax, the others. So I think, you know, my contemplation would be, as I said, to the extent you have a deal on the table where you put up 7% of the money and somebody else puts up the rest, you know, there'd be a way to figure out how to make that happen.
Yes.
I'll tell you, the way I personally feel about it is more power to you, because you have to, the citizens have to vote for this on referendum.
That's right.
And I would support it only if the communication service tax and the public service tax weren't going to you. If y'all want to do an ad valorem tax to make your revenue up, fine. But I don't think it's fair, and I'm not going to forget about Sopchoppy and St. Mark's. We inherited that. But I don't think it's fair for Panacea to be receiving the exact same services as somebody outside and be paying less for it.
I agree.
So that's my position on it. And, but if the citizens want to vote for this franchise fee and they want to pay an extra millage rate, or if they want to pay extra to be incorporated, I'm not going to oppose it.
Yeah.
Well, there's another issue to be brought in franchise fee, where by Stop Shopping not having an ad valorem tax, we're required, I keep saying we because I was on it so long, but they're required to have a franchise fee equal to, I think it's 1 meal. You know, if you don't have an ad valorem tax, you have to have a franchise fee equal to 1 meal.
And they could, let's say, for example, that our PST is 7%. If Panacea wanted to charge 10%, we'd get the 7, and Panacea would then get the other 3%, which that sounds perfectly fair to me if the citizens of Panacea want to pay it.
I guess I would comment. I understand that you all not too long ago went through and became a charter county, and I understand that a lot of the reason for that was you wanted to have a stronger say over your situation. And to my thinking, that's not materially different than the folks in Panacea saying we'd like to have the opportunity to ask the people, do they want to incorporate? It's not, yes, we're going to incorporate. I mean, there's going to be, I think, a public discussion, a public debate, not dissimilar to what we're having here. There's a lot of questions that, you know, that have to be answered. But I think from a standpoint of putting the issue on the table and allowing it to move forward, you know, I said the other night, down when they had the town hall meeting, and the room was full of people from the area, you know, that I have seen around the state that the best relationships between the counties and the cities are when they're kind of in partnership and working together and communicating and trying to solve problems jointly. And your staff has been gracious to sit down with us and to start a conversation. Now, I think you know, from my sense, it's a continuing conversation. And you know, you all, the numbers I've seen, you have a $10 million budget, and the numbers that these various revenue sources add up to is about 100 grand, so it's about 1% of your overall general fund.
174 is the number I see. Like, let's just take 17, 18 for example, and 64% of that is spent on legal service and managerial services. Not that I'm criticizing that, I'm just pointing out that 64% of the revenue is spent on legal and managerial services. And when you say give the citizens a chance to decide, sure, if they're going to decide, do you want to receive the same services you get now but pay the county less, of course, yeah, that sounds fine to me. It's everybody else in the county that's going to be subsidizing this. And if we can get the same revenue we're getting now, and I'm not going to support it personally, and this is just me as one person, with the CS communications and the public service tax going to fund the incorporated city, and we still provide all the same services.
Yeah.
If you want to do a franchise fee, you want to run off the water system, you want to run off ad valorem, bless your heart, fine.
Yeah. Well,
that's my position.
We, you know, our conversations, I'm a big believer in you know, in giving and taking, having negotiated a lot of things out in my years, and it takes some give and take, and you know, we're hopeful that, you know, that we can have some give and take in our conversations with you all with respect to the revenue piece. I don't think you want to take a position where you're saying, you know, we're setting it up so that they're financially strapped and starved. That doesn't do anybody any good. But then again, we're sensitive to the budget situation you have, and you don't want us to come along and take all the services and not pay. Now, we'll also mention, I mean, the ad valorem is still going to be assessed and continue along. We haven't talked about ad valorem, but right now the folks there are paying ad valorem taxes, and that's funding schools and the sheriff and other things. Right. So that's going to continue to flow. I think you get north of $100 million on that, so that's not changing.
Yeah. So I understand that there's dialogue and there's discussion over these numbers, but when you talk about being strapped, right now our county basically runs its budget not on ad valorem anymore, because the sheriff gets the mountain share of that, and I'm not saying that in any kind of negative way. That's the way it's set up right now. That public service utility tax and the communications tax, those are major drivers of our county. And in a year when we've gone in and again had to use reserves to balance our budget, I don't think this board is going to want to put more stress on the budget. And I think that if Panacea wants to be incorporated, it has to do so by financing its own government.
Yeah, I guess I served many years ago in the governor's office of planning and budgeting, and I followed legislative activity. I think this governor has regularly and routinely asked his agency to go through a 10% exercise where they identify 10% of their budgets that can be subject to reduction. It's an exercise. They don't always take that, but it's kind of, I think, something that is done, and from my perspective, I think it's a good thing to look at that. You know, from my sense, you know, it's 1%. Your administrator has shared an email that looked at some things, but my math was about a 1% impact that the city has. I'm not saying 1% is insignificant. I mean, every little bit adds up. But from the purposes of trying to move forward and let the community have this conversation and take an up or down vote on it, you know, if you say, well, does 0.5% work? Or, I mean, you know, I don't know. It's from the standpoint of some back and forth. We're hopeful that conversation can take place and we can continue along.
Let's find out. Guys, what do you think?
I've got some questions. On the revenue side, out of each of the ones you've listed, is it just the franchise fee that we're not receiving? All the rest of them would be offsets from the county to Panacea, is that correct? Or business tax, planning and development fees? We're only talking about the PST and the CST so far, but if we...
The ones, if I can answer this,
Yeah.
the ones that will be shared with the county or come off the county's coffers are the CST, the PST, the state revenue sharing, half-cent sales tax, and the business tax.
What about the planning and development fees?
Planning and development fee is a wash, and I'm not sure why they incorporated those numbers in there, because if we're doing the planning zones, there's no sense in Panacea collecting them and then paying us for them. So those are a wash, so I wouldn't pay any attention
Ralph, I
to
don't
those.
want to let you continue, but just to be clear about that, the only new revenue that the city of Panacea would be generating would be the franchise fees then.
That would be a new revenue that we're putting on their citizens,
Okay.
that's right.
Hey, I want to, go ahead, Ralph.
No, I'm fine.
Well, I just, you know, it's like I said before, I'm supportive of Panacea becoming a city, and I would like to see Panacea becoming a city, and I think Panacea would do well to have control, and I would like to see Panacea have access to these different granting and funding sources. But the reason I was asked, just be an advocate, the reason I was asking the thing is I just wanted y'all to be aware that the numbers that you've got here is not a realistic figure for what it's going to take. It's going to take more to operate than the numbers that you have, is what I was trying to say. Because there's a lot of unknowns out there that you have to prepare for. And I just don't know how Panacea, to begin with, is going to be able to operate without also having an ad valorem tax. You know, I know the only reason Sopshabi can operate without an ad valorem tax is because of the water. The water pays for everything. Even there's a picture in the back with the Sopshabi City Hall, and the way that was built is that City Hall cost around $900,000. $450,000 of it, if I remember right, what we paid cash for, and the other the other money was borrowed against a CD that the city has, and then money from the water pays to build. So none of the money from the public service tax, franchise fee, or anything goes to the city hall or any of that. But they had the water system in order to do that, and in order to get the grants. In order to get those grants, a lot of them take thousands of dollars of upfront administrative fee that you have to pay. And also, I know that Panacea is going to have a comprehensive plan of its own, separate from the county, and that will be several $1,000s up front to create that. And that's just money that's going to be required in addition to the money that's laid here. And that was when I was wondering. I'm very supportive of Panacea. I want Panacea to be a city. I think everybody here would like to see it be a city, but it's going to take more money to become a reality than what is being presented.
Well, I appreciate your support. I mean, from my perspective, there's a lot of work to be done on this. There's a lot of numbers to look at, and I think, in a public discussion, if the numbers aren't going to work, people will point that out and say that. But, we're doing our best to try to figure out a way to make it work and set up some kind of a transition path where we can kind of get there.
My understanding is that you couldn't, you know, if you put it before the city, say, do you want to incorporate based on these parameters? If we approve the parameters as you guys taking the communications, and I support your incorporation too, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't do it, but if part of your proposal is, and we'd have to agree to say, all right, we're going to give you your share of the communications service tax and public service tax, and we're still going to keep doing everything we were doing in the past, what I said earlier, I'm not going to support that. If that's where it's at, I would support it if you had said, we're going to pay ad valorem, extra ad valorem, we're going to pay franchise fees. I make it even go along with the half-cent sales tax and that kind of stuff, but the ongoing operational costs, I'm not going to go along with. I don't know what everybody else feels.
Well, I would
How it
say
feels.
thank you for your support and your indication of support. You know, I think these, just like you all look at all of your revenue sources, Mr. Kessler said, you know, your ad valorem is not much. I mean, you have adjustments that you have to make. You know, my contemplation is that the city, if the people vote to incorporate it, they'll have to look at it and make adjustments. But right now, it's contemplated in the legislation that ad valorem.
You keep saying that they're going to have to look at. I'm sorry. You keep saying that they're going to have to look at and make adjustments. A citizen's not going to look at taking. Well, let's take the communication service tax out. That's where we're at this point, right?
Well,
And I also support not paying property taxes too, by the way, but that's not realistic. So that's what I'm saying is, if you're
Right.
taking the money away from the operational money of the county and still providing the same service, that's what I can't go for.
And I'll just tell you, we you know, I don't want to get in, and we've had some discussions. I don't know if I want to get into great detail, but we recognize to say, okay, we'd like to have interlocal agreements, and we've looked at all the interlocal agreements you have with Sopchoppy and you have Panacea, and said, well, these are pretty good model. Let's just start there. And my understanding is there's some sharing of those types of revenues in exchange for services. And to me, that's, you know, that's a partnership. That's a deal to say, no, we're not coming to give us all the money and still give us the services. I'm going to say, well, let's try to work through this. And if we share some of the money and you provide the services, you know, that's more of a partnership than.
Would we do the same thing today if Sopchoppy were not incorporated? What if Smith Creek wanted to incorporate? You know, if Sopchoppy came to us today in the same situation, that they may not get incorporated. We have Sopchoppy and St. Mark's because they were incorporated when, in the 1800s?
Well, they were, I think, let's see, Sopchoppy was incorporated the first time around about, I think, yeah, they were, I think 1900 around. But they've been incorporated twice. There was a little period of time between, like, I think 1940 and 50, where there was about a 10-year period where they wasn't incorporated, and they got reincorporated the second time, like in the 50s.
Their charter was approved in 1955, and their first incorporation was 1905.
It was right around there. Yeah, he's got the notes. I'm trying to do it off my head.
Wow.
But that happened to a lot of cities during that time. A lot of them become unincorporated and got reincorporated.
St. Mark's was 1963.
But I just wanted to know that everybody to know that a lot of the things that Sopchoppy has, it got through the water revenue. It didn't get through the communications and the franchise. All of the equipment, all of the salaries, all of the employees, everything that Sopchoppy has is paid for by the water.
Well, and I can tell you as I sat with Richard on the commission, and there is no way Sopchoppy would have been able to function just off the general fund revenues. It had to have the water fund in order. Everything we did, we had to either borrow money from the water fund or get money and swap it around. And those, like, we had to pay $50,000 to get a CDBG grant up front.
That's just that one.
Yeah, and I'm
that
not
in the water fund, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. And that's where these are a little different, as I talked to you guys about. If you got a water system or you got an ad valorem tax, then you got enough revenue to make it go.
Yeah.
It's just tough.
Yeah, and I don't think that's, I mean, City of Tallahassee has the electric company. I mean, that's an enterprise fund, just like your water fund, and that
Yes, sir.
that helps make
One
things
more
happen.
quick example, then Ralph wants to say something. The subdivision of Magnolia Gardens was platted, I think, in the 60s also. That would never get approved today. So, I mean, I think using the example of Sopchoppy and St. Mark's compared to you is probably not a good example, because things were done different back then. Go ahead, Ralph.
Question, why is there no CST and PST in 1617? Is that just a typo? It's listed as 0 there in that column.
Y'all can do it like that, you got it made.
Okay. And where is your city hall? What's your plan for your city hall? Obviously, we'll have to rent one, and we've got several options and a lot of vacant buildings in Panacea. And we've all been told by several people that own those buildings, they'll rent them to us for $1 a year.
Okay, so that was my next question, because I don't see any expense in there, so that's something that you're not looking at a big
And
expense.
let me say one thing. You know, we keep talking about the expenses of running the city. I think we have to start very, very small. When Sop
Yes, sir.
Choppy started, they didn't have $1 million in the bank.
No, and whenever Sop Choppy actually got the water system from the county, if I remember right, the actual water budget was like $80,000. That was the water budget. Now the water budget's around $1.5 million. But Sop Choppy initially had a city clerk, a public works director, and had a chief of police. That was Sop Choppy.
Jackie,
Yeah.
Bill, and Claxton.
Yeah, that was Jackie, Bill, and Claxton, and
But-
that's what it had. But
Same thing with St. Mark's.
yes,
When they, you know, y'all keep saying it's 100 years ago. It wasn't 100 years ago. And I understand that it was done by different people, and it might not be done today. But the thing about it is, let's talk about just today. Y'all are doing the exact thing that we're asking you to do for us for these other two cities. We're not asking for anything different.
If I
And
could-
we want to grow, we want to start, we're gonna have to start small. We got a lot of people that volunteer to work in Panacea. And we're gonna have to rely on them to get started. But you gotta start somewhere. And that's what we're asking for you guys, to help us get started.
I'm going to support your incorporation, but I'm just being realistic about some numbers of what it's going to take, even
You're gonna
starting
support
small.
their proposed budget. I think that's the real gorilla in the room here. You're gonna support them taking the CST and PST? If the answer is yes, it's
Well,
yes. If it's no, it's
It's
no.
what, 93,000, I think, is what I'm coming up with.
It's 102,000 is the exact number.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, I don't necessarily buy into it being an all or nothing proposition.
We're gonna get
I mean,
all of
what
those
I'm kind of saying is, let us give us a chance to work with you and come up with something
Yes,
that
sir.
makes sense for us and makes sense for you.
In the other cities, we give them the PST tax,
Correct.
and then we charge them for the services that we render.
No,
We have interlocal agreements.
we have interlocals with those cities.
Don't charge them
Okay.
anything.
And-
So we can give Panacea the same money and
Yes.
have the same
Right,
service.
right.
All right, now that's fair. That's a fair proposition.
Mhm.
If we give it to one, we should give it to the other. I've been told the ad valorem tax was put into the charter simply because the state law required it to be into the charter.
Yes.
I've also been told by the folks who are doing this that they will not put forward an ad valorem tax.
Let me respond to it. The draft bill that's in bill drafting provides that in the event that you were going to impose an ad valorem, it would have to be voted on by the people. So, you know, some local governments may, I'm not 100% sure, but you may have the ability to raise ad valorem just with 3 votes because of your position as elected officials. In our case, because of some feelings that they say, well, this is an important issue, there's concerns about ad valorem, it's drafted to say if you want to put the ad valorem in place, it has to be voted on by the people.
I think there's a couple citizens that want to speak when you're done.
Okay.
Is it just Chris, or is there somebody else that wants to talk?
Well, let's let the commissioners, they need to finish.
But basically, if you come to us with a negative, you come to us with a negative. So, if you bring this up to a break even, then you've got to have some ad valorem tax, and you've got to show what the franchise fee is. Is that too much to ask? If you, instead of us voting for a negative,
Well, they would still be able to take the PST and the CST.
that's
All
correct.
those fees.
That's correct. Well, that's already identified here, and that's not coming out of the citizens of Panacea. That's coming, fair is fair. We give that to other people, whatever. But the franchise fee is going to be on the people of Panacea. And I was not aware of that when I came up here today. The ad valorem tax will be on the people of Panacea. I don't mind those as long as the people of Panacea know that. So I will support this if you can carry forward and show the people of Panacea that when they vote, that this is what they're voting for, okay? You know, if they want to charge themselves the $20 a month, that's fine with me. I'm not going to get in the way of that. But somehow I want to make sure when you take that to referendum, that instead of this thing showing a negative, that you've plugged in the amount of money that it takes to come to a balance. You should be able to start off with a balance. So,
All right, we all agree that we support incorporation. Ralph, what's your
Yeah.
opinion on the PST and CST?
Well, I just want to go into a little more detail. First of all, I'm absolutely in favor of you guys doing this. Completely behind it, 100%. I've got to get comfortable with the price tag. That's the only thing. The timing, decreasing revenues, and our ability to afford it. In my mind, we're not being asked to decide whether or not Panacea can become a city. The citizens that vote in that area will make that decision. We're being asked to decide whether or not we can live without the 102,000. That, to me, that's where it breaks down real simple. And I need some more time to think about this, and I know we're not making a decision right now, but I've got an engineering background, and a lot of times the way we solve a problem is going out trying to prove the problem can work, and sometimes that brings you to a conclusion that it can't work. And so I'd like to issue that challenge, and I'm sure we're already looking at that, but to you guys as well, is let's just go with the assumption that we're going to do this, and now we've got a budget. Assuming that our numbers will be the exact same next year as this year, how would we make it work? Because we have to deal with that. We can't say, feel good, that's great. We have to do that. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to go through and say, okay, if someone ordered me and said, this is going to happen, now go make it work. I'm going to go prove and see if I can make that work. And I'd like to issue you guys, all of us, that same challenge. Whatever cuts. And you know, there may be some things like, and I've looked at it just briefly, and I haven't seen a whole lot of numbers, but and I don't know, but we've got, you know, $4,000 that we're spending on utilities at the Welcome Center. We've got $9,000 that we're spending at the Big Bend Maritime. That's a far cry from where we're trying to get to, but I'm trying to think along those ways that when we're doing a contract negotiation, there's always a win-win on both sides, and there might be something that you guys can take off of our backs in order to make that happen. I'm looking for a way to make it work, but right now I'm telling you I don't see that. But I'm gonna keep trying to figure out if there's a way that I can be comfortable with the price tag, because you know, we can make 800 people happy and 30,000 people mad with this decision, and so we've got to be able to justify. And that's where I'm at. I'm for it, but I got to make sure we can afford it, and so that's where I'm gonna spend my time.
And I'm for it as well, but I think that we need to do nothing more or less than what we're doing for Sop Choppy or St. Mark's. I don't think if we're not doing this for Sop Choppy or St. Mark's, I don't think we need to do it for Panacea or vice versa. But I'm for Panacea become incorporated, but I don't want Panacea to be coming right off the bat fiscally constrained. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is I don't want Panacea. I want Panacea to be incorporated. I want it to have a chance of being able to sustain itself, but to succeed. But I think it's going to take more. It's going to take more than what y'all have presented. I don't see how y'all going to be able to do it without having at least some additional ad valorem to cover the gap.
I'm going to differ a little bit from you guys. I don't think they should be treated the same as Sop Choppy and St. Mark's. Not that you're.
When you say you guys,
huh?
you're not including me in that?
No.
Okay.
No, I said Richard and Jerry, because, again, we've inherited that, just like old subdivisions, and that's just the way it's been. And, you know, I remember when Sop Choppy certainly improved a lot over the years, and
it started off
I
real
support
small.
it 100%. If you can make it work on your own with Ralph's idea, if we can cut expenses that you guys take over, that's fine and dandy. And if you can survive on your own revenue, that's fine and dandy. And, you know, there may be some things I'd be willing to look at, but not operational expenses. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, and I think I'm going where you're going, where this, you know, the idea of fair is fair. What we're doing for Sop Choppy and St. Mark's, we should be doing for Panacea. I don't think we can make that statement without looking at what are we doing for St. Mark's and Sop Choppy. What services are we providing? You know, all of the roads that were paved in St. Mark's, I mean, the county took care of that. I don't think the population of St. Mark's could have done that. So really, the citizens of the county have been carrying a lot of the services on their backs that were going to the municipalities.
And they used to have, by the way, a police, you know, they had their own police force in Panacea
Yeah.
and Sopchoppy, and they had their own parks
And
department.
so, yeah, so what I'm saying is, before we can make the statement what's fair is
still have
fair
our own
and
parks
give,
department.
you know, this PSAT if you want to, or whatever you want, I think we really have to look at what the balance sheet is on each one of those municipalities before we can make the statement for the third municipality.
Well, and that's, you know, when City of St. Mark's, and I told Mark this, and that when both of those cities started out, the reason they charged these is they had services they were rendering. They rendered a service, like Sopchoppy and St. Mark's both had the same thing going. And that's one of the things that, you know, Panacea is not offering us any type of service, asking us for that. And I think that's been the hang-up with even my conversations with Mark. That has been that. I understand. I'm with you guys. I understand that, and we looked at Commissioner Thomas. And that's something I'm continuing to. Greg and I met on that today. Is what is the value of those other assets in Panacea to where there's some type of work down? You know, what is that value? But understand, we got to be careful. A lot of these things were purchased with grants, so therefore, you know, they're not easy to transfer over. And so, I mean, there's a lot of complicating factors, as well as these assets would need to be sold because our citizens have invested in these. So therefore, and that's not in this. It's not in the equation. So, Greg and I have been working on that and trying to figure out a number that says, you know, because that's one of the things I'm working with these guys. I said, what about if we take this, and this over? What does that do? And at the end of the day, the numbers I'm running it's just not big enough to jump out there and say, let's go do it.
I think our relationship with Sopchoppy and Panacea is a lot more symbiotic than it would be with a new incorporated. In other words, St. Mark's has
St. Mark's, right.
has a boat ramp that a lot of citizens use, brings a lot of people to the county. They maintain it, they paid for it. We don't have to pay anything for it. Sopchoppy has a city park, a lot of people go to that.
And it doesn't cost the
It
county.
doesn't cost the citizens of the county a dime. Now, let's allocate about 10 minutes at the end for citizens, okay?
Well, I think Panacea can get to that same point. I think that, you know, if we could figure out a way to do this, it could be an investment. It's just, can we afford it? That's my biggest thing. You know, our women's club, we need to pile a bunch of money into the women's club. So that is a negative that we don't even have it in the equation yet. But maybe you guys can take that off of us. And so it's one thing that we don't. I'm just throwing out ideas to figure out if there's some way that we can make a win-win. You know, I don't want to negotiate a contract that's all give and no take, or all take and no give, and that's all I'm trying to do.
Ongoing expenses too, not one time. You know, if we write the Women's Center off one time, we need to make up the revenue and if you can find a way to do it, bless your heart. If you can find a way to make it.
All I'm saying is, I know it's not easy, and I know these guys have spent a lot more time on it than I have. But I'm searching for it, because I don't want to come in with my mindset that yes, it can work without looking at it, or no, it can't work without looking at it. And so,
Yeah. Well, thank you for your creativity.
Well, and like I said before, I want Panacea to succeed. I want Panacea to be an incorporated city. We just got to get to a point where we're looking at some realistic numbers.
Yeah, and we would look forward to working with your staff and you guys to try to put together a plan that makes sense and, you know, is a win-win. I mean, everybody's in the same area, and hopefully we can figure it out.
Like 10 minutes to speak.
All right, let's give citizens a chance to speak within the last 10 minutes.
Thank you for your time.
thank you.
You're welcome. Chris, did you want to? Yeah. He don't need to do a card for this. If you're here at the airport, please fill out a card. We got a bunch of people. I'm gonna have to split the time up so we can get something accomplished.
So what you're saying is I have 10 minutes for this?
No, I think Walt wanted to speak too, right? Well, Fred, you want to talk? Okay.
All right, we got 3.5 each.
Yeah,
All right,
3.
so I was looking at my notes, looking at this before, and I said the number one issue is going to come down to tax. Absolutely, the PST. It's very encouraging to hear that y'all are actually looking at ways to do it. I do think, although you want to say it's not the same, it is the same. Mind you, I've never lived in Panacea. I don't live there now. I may not ever live there. I live in the county, and yes, it would be somewhat of a subsidy in some people's minds. But it is the taxpayer dollars coming from Panacea. It is my service as a county, right? So we're all right. David Edwards does a good job of keeping it in balance, right? We're looking at about $100,000 here. It's not that much money, especially if you back it down and do some things that you're talking about there. We seem to find money when we need it. We put money in community center, bam, just like that. We're looking at buying some land for a rec park. We have money out there. We can do it. We can make this happen. I'd like to equate this to, I don't know, when my parents sent me to college. You know, it kind of strapped them to do it. It strapped me. They made me work 3 jobs, but strapped them as well. They had to make sacrifices, but they knew in the end it was going to be generational benefits. They have grandkids now that are not sitting there on the street. You cannot think about this today. You have to be thinking 30 years from now. This is a small investment that we as a county can do. I highly encourage you to go forward with it. I encourage you to look at Crawfordville in the future as well. This is just a little bit to get there. It sounds like we have a starting point, possibly with some PST money or whatnot. As a citizen that is not in that city, but loves this community and wants to see it grow, I hope you will move forward with it and look at this as a long-term benefit. Thanks for letting me speak. Randy.
Alfred? And Bill will do you next. I just had her set the time at 2 minutes. Have we got
Thank you,
time
Commissioners.
left?
I'll be real quick. You know, Commissioner Moore come down and talked to me the other day. You know, as far as going ad valorem tax and a lot of taxes, I'd probably vote against it. But, Commissioner, you know, I told you I run businesses for 47 years. I've always had to make a profit. If we take Panacea, we're a tourist area, we can generate jobs, we can generate commerce, we can put our business back staying, and we can generate some money for the city to cut some of these taxes. And once we pass this hurdle here and we get with the state, then we got a time period before we vote. I'm not going to tell you I would vote for it. But if we can answer these things, I think we can. And I think we can give some opportunity to the people. We're a low-income area. I think we will increase the ad valorem tax to the point that we would offset any amount of money we're going to get from you. So my goal is if we can't put the business plan together to make it work, and I've always had to do it. I've never had money to operate on. So I would like you to help us with this challenge and see if this experiment will work. But what we would do is offer some opportunity to a lot of people that don't have any.
Bill, do you want to talk?
Thank you.
Like Chris, I don't live in Panacea, so I'll be paying these taxes but I think you need to do it just because it's the right thing to do. Panacea has been knocked on its butt again and again. The net ban, the general decline of the seafood industry, and then the oil deal, people aren't coming to the coast. I think you need to do this to give them a chance to sort of beautify, make the place a little bit nicer, and eventually you'll get your money back and that property values will go up. Everything, like Chris said, it may take a long time. You're not going to get your money back next year, but you need to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Come on.
I'll be quick too. I'm Dave Lansford, a disenfranchised citizen of Panacea. Commissioner Arden, you said $20 on your utility bill? I looked at this $64,000 and I did a quick calculation, and you can check me on it. But I divided that by 12 to put it on monthly basis. Got about a little over $5,000, and then divided that by 800 citizens in Panacea. And it worked out about 60 cents per person. Now that's not $20 a bill. Now,
Well, like an ant was on my light bill, it has an itemized
Okay.
of what's going on.
Okay.
It spells it out every month what it is.
but maybe the number of bills that come out don't equal the number of citizens. But anyway, I sort of doubt whether, it would be quite that high.
$6.67 a month, actually.
I'm close.
And
There's been a
couple decimal
couple of
points.
factors,
There's a couple of factors in there, though.
Okay.
degrees of magnitude, but yeah.
And the
pretty
next
close.
thing I had was the communication service tax and the public service tax. And one of those you all imposed here not too long ago. What I'd like to know is, what services do we get in Panacea for those? And I would think that y'all could direct the staff to try to tell us what are we getting? What are we paying for? Or what are we paying for and not getting?
Just real quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on it.
I'm leaving.
That pays for the clerk of the court, that pays for the property appraiser's office, that pays for tax collector, that pays for the Parks and Rec Department, that pays for the supervisor elections office, that pays for
I'm specifically
library, that pays...
I'm specifically asking what out of Panacea is paying for.
Smith Creek would have an even better case than Panacea, I would
Well,
think.
I'm thinking like the
EMS services.
lights at in the park and that sort of thing. But hey, it would be nice if we knew what we were paying for. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, y'all done?
I got one follow-up
Gary,
question.
you wanted to say something too? Go ahead.
Is there any way possible for us to reduce the public service tax, say, to 5%, and they assess a 5% public service tax?
No.
That had to be a county-wide basis? Okay.
They could always charge a 10%,
They could
give
charge
us the
more.
7.5, and they could take the other 2.5.
And so
We
that
have
can be
no-
worked out through
Yeah,
a
the Department of
MOU.
Revenue, yeah. Yeah.
We have
Okay.
one more citizen,
Yeah.
Jerry. I know you want to... Go ahead.
I'm here
Martha
for
Interrupt.
information really, but I own 7.5 acres in Panacea in an enterprise zone. So I've been trying to attract jobs, businesses. They're hard to fill that piece of property. I don't know what effect this would have on the taxes in an enterprise zone because we're giving the businesses a benefit if they come. So if, to make this work, they're going to have to increase the franchise tax and ad valorem tax, which on business there may make it substantially more difficult to attract businesses there. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's an important consideration. Thank you.
Jerry, you want...
As I said earlier, when we approve this or do not approve it, but I will vote for it, okay? But you got to show the citizens what the cost of you got to balance this budget. You got to balance this. You can't start out as a negative.
And I'm also going to vote to support it, but I just want Panacea to be able to have a chance starting out and not be fiscally strained right off the bat.
Mr. Hard, we're not planning on paying all those legal fees.
Yes.
You know how these lawyers control the legislature about these fees.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, we're adjourned.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right, again, if you're here for the airport... All right, we're going to go and get started. Here's how we're going to do it. John's going to give a 10-minute presentation. John, he's promised me it'd be 10 minutes.
You did time at 10 minutes.
David has come up with an idea on the airport, you know, maybe a halfway position on it. He's going to tell us what that is, maybe go over it a minute. Then we're going to do citizens' comment on it. And then I'm going to reserve the board maybe 15 minutes at the end of the meeting, because we got 13 people that want to speak. So if we do, let's just say 3 minutes apiece, that'll leave us 15 minutes, and we're going to adjourn at 6. So we need time to discuss amongst ourselves if y'all want to get any idea what direction we're going to be going on this. So please try to limit your time so it'll leave us some time at the end of the meeting to talk. So John, go ahead. And I'm going to slip out and use the bathroom and free.
Good evening, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, I thought somebody was in it.
First off, I want to mention real quick, I've got the presentation queued up here. This doesn't count towards my time, but the presentation was actually modified earlier today, so this presentation is slightly different than the one that was on the website today. Katie wanted me to let everybody know that if they want a copy of this one, all they have to do is request it from her and she'll email it to them. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the airport, Wakulla County Airport Master Plan. This project was funded through a DOT grant from the District 3 Aviation Office in Chipley. And this project basically is to come up with a new plan for the airport to help the county decide how they want to move forward with the airport in the future.
There was a master plan completed a bunch of years ago. It's really out of date. There was an ALP update done back about 5 years ago. And this is to actually update the master plan, actually create a new master plan and a new ALP, or an airport layout plan. Once completed, this master plan will go to the Florida DOT for review for sufficiency, and the ALP will go to the FAA for review. It's also to present development options for the airport. Airports generally operate on property and off property, and it's to kind of look at what's on property, and if there's property that should be acquired, it identifies what that property is and for what purpose it can be used for. And so basically this is just to identify some strategies that the airport can use to operate and grow in the future or not grow in the future. And so I'd like to kind of walk you through that right now. We assembled a project advisory committee with guidance from staff. I'd like to thank all of these folks. Carol Odell, who I know is here, I said hello to her earlier today. David Lansford, Jim Parham, John Andrew Smith, who I believe could not be present tonight, Stan Brown, Tim Jordan, and Joey Tillman. Thank you very much for your participation. It was very helpful. So basically, the components of the master plan, we inventory what's out there. Frankly, there's not much out there, as you all know. We look at aviation activity forecasts. There really isn't one. It's very limited activity out there. We look at capacity. There's tons of capacity out there on the single runway that it has. We look at facility requirements, alternatives for a development, the layout plan, which is basically the airspace, the runway configuration, and how that lays out with everything around it. We look at a financial plan. We do public involvement, which we did. We had a public meeting in addition to the stakeholder involvement, and we provide an environmental overview that just kind of looks at what the environmental requirements or constraints are as a result of the ALP. Public involvement. This is a long list of it. We actually did more meetings than this. There were several one-on-one meetings with Jim Parham and John Andrew Smith. But this kind of documents, the public involvement was pretty comprehensive and well done, I think. And we got a bunch of different opinions on the airport, which I'll kind of allude to here and there throughout this presentation. Now, what we've done is we've developed a series of development options. These options consider a bunch of different aspects. The first one, obviously, is no build, which basically means you do nothing. The second one would be make full improvements to existing airport per the ALP. And this one is pretty much the most that you could do with the surrounding properties that are kind of available in the area, and it would require property acquisition. There's another option we identified, which is the phased development per the ALP. Transfer of ownership and management of the airport to the Tarpine Homeowners Association. And the last one is relocate the airport. And I also wanted to mention that David Edwards has come up with another option, which I'm going to get to later in the presentation. But the relocation of the airport is the last option, and it's something that had to be considered based on what the constraints at the airport currently are. Things to think about. The current airport activity is pretty minimal. However, I will say this, there is a community that's been out there for years that relies on the airport on a day-to-day basis. There's folks that have invested their funds, their family monies into a parcel. They've built a house with a hangar, and they've built their life around that airport being there. So that's something to consider. A lot of taxpayers out there, a lot of people paying a lot of taxes in that community. So I think that's important to consider. Almost the entire airport is now in the new FEMA V-zone. So this is a new thing. It's impacting other property owners in Wakulla County, as you're aware. And while it represents some challenges, they're not insurmountable. So this FEMA V-zone issue is an issue, but it's nothing that can't be engineered around. Okay, so that's something I want to make real clear. The benefits and costs of airports. There's a lot of benefits to airports. I won't go down the whole list of them, but they offer a lot of employment. Airports are generally one of the largest economic engines within a community. This one currently is not, although there are a lot of folks that pay taxes and have bought land based on that airport. So I think those are really important considerations to think about. I'd like to walk through the no-build option. There really is no do-nothing option here. I think I want to make that real clear, although I call this the no-build option. In this option, the county would still need to remove the runway safety intrusions to remain compliant with FDOT standards. And there's trees, there's buildings, there's berms, there's poles, there's all sorts of stuff out there that has all been documented by DOT and needs to be resolved. And really the only way that that can be resolved, frankly, is take it all down. In some cases, you might even have to remove a T-hanger, but probably property acquisition would really be the only way to do that. To remain compliant, there would also still need to be land acquisition and site modification costs. As I said, drainage would have to be dealt with, and again, that's an engineering function which we would have to do in any case. There would likely be a temporary closure of the airport during the time needed to complete these improvements. You can work around it, but typically if you're going to be doing these types of improvements, you're going to have a temporary closure. And so basically, the airport must implement a recommendation to remain open and operational. So this is the airport layout plan. This is a technical exercise that looks at things like the runway protection zones, or these cone-shaped areas at the ends of the runway. The existing runway is a grass strip. This is an existing T-hanger that's actually been built in the primary surface. This is a stormwater retention facility, I think. It was actually dug out as part of this construction, we believe, and this is all in private property ownership. And so one of the things that we've looked at in this ALP is the need to move the airport in this direction downward. Actually, it's not downward, it is to the west. And so basically to move the airport to the west slightly so that you can get the runway out away from the obstructions that are located on the eastern boundary of the airport. The berm, the biggest problem, frankly, is this berm right here that was created when this T-hanger was constructed. So that was really the largest problem with it. But again, this parcel is not a overly expensive parcel, we don't think, and so moving the runway slightly to the west would probably be the best solution. It solves almost all of the problems that you would have in the primary surface area. There's also some trees, frankly, that have already been cut, and due to some good coordination with the property owners, that's all been dealt with. And on this end, we basically have a U.S. highway, which is not ideal. There are some extenuating circumstances here in that FAA would probably be less likely to fund through their grant program due to this incursion into a transportation facility, although we heard recently that there may be changes to that. In working with the property owners on Surf Road, we understand that the area around the airport was clear-cut illegally, and so we actually did this rendition to show how plantings could be done, but as we understand from the property owners, the vegetation's growing back, and the suggestion would be that this whole end of the runway would actually be converted to a conservation area, which you actually see right here. We have it shaded as a conservation easement, and that's really not a problem to do that as part of the ALP and as far as the future development of the airport. It provides a buffer to the property owners. It restores the vegetative buffer that was here naturally, and as I said, all that's growing back as I understand it. And there'd have to be some parcels acquired to make all that work. The airport at full build-out. Basically, this would provide a paved runway, fuel farm, fuel facility, possibly 3 T-hanger buildings, and one of which could be a maintenance facility, most likely, an airport office or a fixed base operator, designated helipad, not a licensed helipad, but a helipad where emergency services could land, conservation easement and noise buffer, which I pointed out earlier, security fencing, lighting, and gates. And actually there was a report done by DOT that looked at security fencing for the airport. And actually I think that's could be a funded project. That probably could be one of the first projects that is done as a result of that report that was done by DOT last year. The full development option, as we're calling this, full development of all these recommended enhancements. The runway construction would be about $3.4 million. Land acquisition, including the existing T-hangar building, all of the parcels that would be needed, the estimate is roughly about $1 million in parcels, but those parcels could be purchased over time, little by little. Constructing hangars, about $1 million. Environmental services, doing the NEPA study that would be required for the property, roughly somewhere in the $100,000 to $200,000 range, depending on the class of action. Fuel facility, total cost roughly a little over $5 million. Now, we also created a phase development option where all of these improvements could be done over time and little by little. And this could, phase one could be the land acquisition. Phase two could be the income generating phase, which looked at the fuel facility, the T-hangars, and maintenance facility, and those types of things. The third phase could look at the environmental design and construction of the runway and all those things, and then they could be phased over time, which most likely would have to be done anyway based on the available funds. So the other thing that we did was we wanted to look at it from a business perspective and look at what the possible monthly revenues might be. And so how did we do this? We based this on other local airports, generally made estimates and those types of things. But when you look at the full build-out option, what would this thing really generate in terms of income? A best-case scenario is right around about $100,000 to $150,000 annually when you look at those different aspects such as fuel, the hangars, the landing fees, business fees for maintenance facility, and those types of things. And there are other benefits that would be in addition to this, such as the employment that the airport would maintain. So,
John, you shot your estimate over by just a shade. We're about halfway through, so
all right.
I think we
Let me move it along.
I'll talk. Thank you.
Sure. And then we also have to look at expenses on a monthly basis and on an annual basis. And again, you know, this is compared to peer airports, estimates, and things like that. And these estimates are all pretty conservative. They're low from the revenue side, and they're a little high probably from the expense side. But when you compare it out, you know, it looks like you might be able to turn some level of profit. And again, these are estimates. And when we look at this and we compare this to other airports, like a Quincy or like a Perry, these estimates are pretty much what those airports are seeing. Generally, they break even, or they're a little bit over or a little bit under, if they're well run. So, the next option, transfer airport to Tarpine. This is not a popular option with the Tarpine community, I can tell you that right now. And basically, Tarpine and the county and the heirs of that property would have to work out the details of this transfer of ownership. And that's a little bit beyond my expertise, but I understand that it's a doable option from the perspective of the county's attorney. The airport would become a private facility. And there's two options on that. There's privately owned, public use, and there's privately owned, private use. The public use option would still have to go through the licensing requirements of the FDOT. Okay? So all this would have to be approved by FDOT and FAA. Privately owned, private use. As I said, I'm going to click past this fairly quickly, as the privately owned private use is a simpler process in terms it's a registration, not a license, so it's a much quicker way to deal with it. But as I understand from Tarpine, they are not interested in this because they would like the airport to remain a public use airport. The public use airport would still have to go through the requirements of DOT's inspection and licensing requirements per 1460-007. The relocation option. Some folks brought this up as the option. You basically close the airport and reopen a brand new airport somewhere else. I can tell you, I worked on the Panama City Airport, and that had the full financial backing of private developers, free land, and it still took over a decade. So think about that. It's a very expensive, time-consuming, litigious process. And in looking at where the county could possibly do this, I had a difficult time really seeing where you could do this without running into a lot of opposition from property owners. So you look at where the property, the other airports are, and you look at where Wakulla is. You know, frankly, spatially, it actually makes a lot of sense to have the Wakulla Airport in this location. So you look at these relocation costs. I'm just going to skip right to the bottom. You're looking at roughly, and I guess these are just kind of showing comparisons to the other airports. Wakulla Airport is on 12 acres, Carabel and Quincy on 200 acres. So, and it shows these operational and revenue comparisons, and they're all roughly about the same. Just some other considerations for relocation is just the cost of the land, the environmental, the design, the construction, and total cost. That's a real low number, my guess would be. When you rein in legal costs, it'd probably be much more than that, and it'd probably be at least 12 years, So, options for board action. We kind of need direction from the board tonight in terms of how we process the rest of the master plan and the ALP. One option is to do nothing. The other option is to move forward with improvements at the airport. It could be phased. It could be done as much as you possibly can do all at once. Funding will have to come from a variety of sources, including the Florida DOT. And relocation is an option. So the next steps, we kind of need board direction. And then we will, based on your board direction, we'll submit the master plan after the next board meeting where you'll take action on this. And you take that board action at the next meeting. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Was he supposed to speak on the new idea, or was that going to be David?
We're going to have John give his 10-minute presentation, and then David's going to tell us what the idea was. And then we're going to have citizen input. And then
Y'all have any questions of John at this time? John, we're not going to make it. There's no decisions to be made tonight, in case y'all wondering. So that'll be coming back to you. That's right. Any questions of John from you guys? Okay. The chairman asked me a couple of weeks ago to look at what I thought as far as the county manager, and I said, and give an opinion.
Put it off on David.
Put it off on, put it off on me. So I said, well, that's, I'm not supposed to be non-political here, but so I looked at it from a lot of different aspects. The airport has been here since 1963, and we need to try to find. To me, there's a lot of aspects where it doesn't. It's got its positives. It also has its negatives from the limited market for fly-ins, but also we haven't really given the airport a chance, because we really haven't upgraded the airport to see whether it could really make a difference for the small planes to fly in and enjoy our fishing. And we don't have a big second home community here, even though we do have a second home community, but the larger your second home community, the more of those fly in, but we just don't have that here, so that's some of our market. But anyway, so thinking about this, I came up with a public-private option. And I feel like this is not a bad way to go. One of the first things, though, that has been spouted out, as John's talked about, has been discussed, is there's a lot of concern as whether the V-zone makes a difference, whether, what kind of difference that's going to make about the environmental. We'll have to fill a few wetlands. All these, flooding, stormwater, all these issues. to me, these issues, we can talk about them in here, we can say they'll be effective and they'll take effect and they'll work, this will work and that'll work, but really we don't know until you actually do a design and you actually run through that design model and actually get down to your engineering and see whether take your engineering and perform it and then test it and then see what kind of permits are needed out there for these and whether these permits are available or obtainable, which I believe all of them would be attainable. It would take some time, but my first thing would be is we need to do a preliminary engineering concept design. This would be funded by DOT as a first step, and this would go through. We would go through and realign the airport to, as John has mentioned, assuming that realignment, and then have an engineering concept design done on that, and they would evaluate. They would address the flood zone, the runway paving or leaving it grass, and also they would document all of the permitting requirements and then run those through the testing to see if there's anything that's there that's not overcomable, I should say. I know that's not a word, but and then we would from there identify those construction costs. That is borne by DOT. Those costs are borne by DOT, and then and only then that becomes a go no go point. Because if the answer's all of a sudden there's something up there that says, this thing ain't, we can't get that, we can't get there from here, then our options turn back to giving it back to Tarpine. Okay, and that's really then we have, at least we know. But I think that option will be yes, we could move forward. Then and only then would I purchase, once I have my permits and I have all, then I would go and purchase the land to the left, the 16 acres to the west,
with grant money.
With grant money. Purchase the properties at both ends of the airport. Do not purchase the hangars. Do not purchase any of the hangar area. Then we would also go to we would go to construction. Move the airport, center it as per John's. Whether we grass it or pave it at this point in time is not. I mean, that's something we can look at the time. Assuming right now it would be a grass runway. Install the landscape buffers. We would construct a fuel farm. The fuel farm would be a swipe farm, to where you go and you swipe your credit card. Then, excuse me. Then to pay for this, that's been one of the biggest things. Tarpine is a flying community and was developed as a flying community. And there's T hangars there that benefit from the airport being there. My take on this is if the county's going to do this, we're going to say, okay, we're going to work with FDOT. Here's your airport. Here's the airport. That's all we're doing. We're not going to get into business. That's hangars and all that stuff. That should be on the private industry side anyway. Government has no business being there. And all these other ancillary things that can come off of it, we don't, as a government, we don't need to be in it. We can barely maintain what we've got, much less that. And with the direct benefit of the airport being, and Tarpine being a flying community, the maintenance cost of maintaining the airport should be borne by the ones that are directly benefiting from it, meaning the T hangars as well as the 142 lots or however there are in Tarpine. Those costs would be divided up. Currently, we're projecting those costs to, in the near term, to be about $6,000 a year, which is about between $40 and $50 a month year, to be borne by them. That way, Tarpine, they have skin in the game. They're paying the maintenance costs. The county taxpayers, the only cost that we would have in the future would be purchasing tractors to mow, replacing it, anything that wasn't left over from the maintenance budget. One of the last things that we need to do, we do not need, is to have another employee here. This keeps us out of the employee situation here. We don't have an airport manager. We don't have people out there all the time, and therefore that's a negative drain on the county. This breaks the county even. We're not as exposed. We have limited exposure. We haven't invested all the monies, but we've got limited exposure. We provided an airport, and the public sector can do all the other ancillary things as well as the community is paying for the cost.
Okay, I'll only
That's
sum up
not-
David's plan. Do the improvements needed to bring the runway into compliance, which is buy the property and move the runway over, if the engineering studies say you can do it
That's
without
right.
shooting yourself in the foot. Build a buffer zone back along Surf Road
Mhm.
as per the master plan. The only other thing on the master plan that will be done is the fuel stuff, but it'd be self-serve, and we can charge whoever we want for the fuel to help.
That's right,
pay
and the
for
county gets the profits off of that.
card swipe, assess tar pine, $40 to $50 a year, every lot.
Every lot.
And that will help pay for the, in
That's right.
addition to the landing fees we'll get from people.
That's right.
Which are taxable to be on the honor system, and do that. All right, let's let the citizens talk. We got 16 people. I mean, I'm not gonna just shut us off right in the middle of a conversation, but let's, 2 minutes apiece, please. If you wanna comment on David's idea, please don't insult David. He was asked just to come up with an idea representing the county, but if you wanna insult anybody, you can insult us.
Can I make a point?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just one real quick point for the citizens speak is, that option is a good option. The only thing I would stress is y'all still need to move forward with adopting the master plan and the ALP to maintain your license.
I understand.
Okay.
Exactly.
We gotta do one of something, is what
That's
John
right.
is saying,
Exactly.
just to translate for him. So, you know, the briefer your comments are, the more times you leave us. If you hate the airport, you love the airport. You hate David's idea, you love David's idea. Just try to be as concise as possible if you can, please. Katie said 2 minutes. Bill Manford?
Manifold,
Manifold?
that's me. Thank you, Commissioner, for your time. And Mr. Edwards, you've certainly cleared up a couple of points for me, particularly on the stop or go or make a decision at some point in the future as to how you're going to develop it. I'm the Vice President of the Refuge Homeowners Association. I bet you didn't know one existed. It took us a while to get started because of the unfortunate loss of our developer. I won't go any further into that. But we're here now and we're vibrant and we want to be a part of the solution to this airport. I'm concerned. My wife and I own the only house there. You probably see me there on weekends
Is she the
mowing
president?
out front and mowing the lawns and so forth. I'm sure some of you had, because I didn't want it to look like a total desolate wreck, and as you know, it started to look like that, particularly with the vandalism of our clubhouse and so forth. My concerns are with runoff. When you put in, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to amount to about 5 million cubic feet. If the plans I saw are correct, which was raise the runway up to the height of the VFW building, that's scary.
That's why he has said.
Don't know where you got that, but go ahead.
That's why he
fine.
has said do an engineering study to make sure it's.
That's right.
We can't,
All
we
that'll be-
we
all
can't
that'll
do
be
that in a
vetted
V
out.
zone. We can't
Yeah.
go in and fill in a V zone, so.
Well, that's good. The noise level, they've mowed down about, I guess, 100 feet from the back of my property to the airport. They've left about 100 feet there. My understanding is that the airport would come all the way to my property line. That's the plans that I saw. They just flashed up there. It said future development on it, but it would definitely be part of the airport plan. I'm concerned about the future depreciation of our property values. I don't know too many people want to live, you know, a grass strip is fine. We're talking hobbyist. I like aviation myself, and I appreciate the people who do it, but the commercial type airport just isn't in our future.
That's not vision at all, sir.
You've answered one part of my question, that's expense to the county. If the county is not going to have anything to do with the operation of it, that certainly answers that. At any rate, I wanted to make my...
Sir, please wrap it up. We got, the buzzer just went off. We got 15 other people who want to talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you listening to me.
Yes, sir.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Dave, M-O-R, Mortico. I'm going to just spell your last name so I don't embarrass myself.
It's my terrible spelling. I should have put it
Yeah, I should have blamed it on you.
I'll be brief. David Edwards, I think your idea may have some merit, pending any, legal review and making sure that we can indeed do that. I think that may be a path forward for us. We certainly don't want to see the airport go away. We've coexisted peacefully with everyone on Surf Road for a very long time. And I would like to make one correction, if I may. Tarpine never had the airport. There's no giving it back to Tarpine. It never was. It was always a county airport. When people started building and living there, they started picking up the slack for maintenance. Matt Gandy used to go out and mow the runway on his old Craftsman riding lawnmower. And we've been doing things like that ever since. So we appreciate the efforts that the county's put forward in improving the maintenance there and, helping mow the grass and things like that. And I'd just like to recommend that we move forward and approve the master plan and try to keep this thing moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Huey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Huey. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the Ochlockonee Bay Alliance people. And just to let you know, I own a home down here, and I own several properties down here, been coming down here since the mid-'60s. The plan is new. Mr. Edwards' plan is new. I can't respond too much to it other than to tell you, first of all, we're very pleased that at least there seems to be people coalescing around the conservation at the south end of the runway, the conservation declaration. We think that's helped solve a lot of things. Secondly, I would just say that there's another alternative that hasn't been discussed too much, and that is the privately owned public airport concept. And I would just point out, you can see all the tabs in this book. That's how many there are in the state, so that's not a novel concept. One of the things that I think everybody wants is they would love this area to grow more. I think we certainly recognize that the current economy is not one that necessarily begs for the airport to be expanded. My own view is that the future economy for this area does not beg for a substantially expanded airport in this area based upon the folks that I know who come here and what they come here for. It certainly is up for debate amongst anybody, but it would seem to me the simpler the better. If you want to maintain an operational county owned facility, I'll wrap up right here. It seems to me you could make sure you're in compliance with the DOT regs by buying the land next to it and either turn it over and let it be privately owned, public, or you could continue to operate it yourself.
Thank you. Carol O'Dell?
Good evening. I'd like to talk about the real estate market in Tarpine. Ever since we've been having the discussion about the airport, pilots who have come to look at the property and airport have turned away because they've known that there's been issues about whether the airport's going to be open or not. There have been contracts that have fallen through. There have been people who've come and decided not to buy there because there's no fuel and there's issues that have not been decided. So I want to say that, yes, an airport will help Tarpine to grow. That brings more money in for the county. And so it's a good idea for the county to move forward. The idea that David spoke about tonight, it's all new to me. I can't really voice an opinion. But I am for the airport staying open because it has been here for a very long time. A lot of people like myself, we came here because it was an airport. The county platted that subdivision, approved that subdivision, the airport was there, and so I hope that you'll keep the airport open and go forward with the improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Reggie Ashley?
Good evening. I'd just like to say that I agree with the phase plan here that was presented a while ago, and I think it's a very doable thing. Now, again, Dave's plan there is new to us, but I think that anything that would move forward and keep the airport open, we'd be glad to see that take place. Tarpine, for the most part, does not want to run the airport. Like the lady said, Carol just said, a lot of us moved here because the airport was already there. I first started flying this area when I lived in Georgia back in 1974. There was no Tarpine there at that time. It was just the airport. And so I think that this can serve the community as a whole. This area is the tourist as the industry down here for fishing on the weekend. You see the fishermen coming from other states, Alabama, Georgia, enjoy these areas, and I think the improvements made to the airport would add to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bill Russell?
I don't own an airplane, but I like having a county airport. Dave's plan sounds pretty reasonable. I would just like to add that I don't have a problem with some of my tax money going to keep that airport open. I don't have a problem with it going to Parks and Rec and going to the library, and those are things I don't use. I don't use the airport, but we need that airport. It's always been a county airport. It was a county airport where there was no tar pine, and it needs to stay a county airport.
Thank you. Bill Anderson?
Chris, you did hear him agree with me, right?
I did.
Okay.
Write that down. Evelyn, did you get that?
I have some written comments I'd just like to put into the record. But in addition to that, in addition to tar pines, I live right across from the airport, a little to the west side, where they're talking about moving the runway. And a lot of the other citizens don't have any objection to an airport being down there. But the encroachments that are talking about basically came about because the county allowed them to be there and permitted the restaurant, the hangars, etc. So I think David's suggestion has a lot of merit or whatever, but when you're considering that and buying the 16 acres for the refuge and the other houses across Surf Road, you ought to move the runway the minimal distance. So you're not encroaching on the runway, or excuse me, on the refuge or the other citizens there. It's as close to what it's originally been as possible, including a grass strip. The $5,600,000 that you've seen here would totally change what has been down there and would affect the other properties all around it. Thank you.
David, would moving the runway a minimal amount leave any buffer zone between the refuge?
Well, yeah, that's in fact the plan that John and I have worked on, and all of us worked on it. It moved it just far enough to get it outside of
Absolute minimum
the
requirement.
absolute minimum. It was enough. In fact, we skewed it just a
Chairman,
little
we
bit.
asked what that figure is. What is the absolute minimum that's being moved?
It varies because we actually skewed the airport, so it's going to be greater on the north end. The skew is greater on the north end. than it is
It's
on the south,
actually
right?
it's actually just slightly. It went like this to just slightly like
Right.
this, and that's actually the reason why two of those parcels on that end actually have to be acquired, is to create that skew to keep it off of that property
But
boundary.
if I may, Mr. Chairman.
I don't have the exact figure.
At the south end of the airport, because that's where the money is, okay? I'm not talking about the money in the land, I'm talking about that's where the most interest is as far as
The south end, it
Lockney Bay
stays,
side.
on the Lockney Bay side, it stays closest to its current position.
Okay.
The other end gets...
It adjusted out, like I said, on the north end is where the kick out was.
All right, Mike Morgan? I can give you that figure. David, draw us a picture real quick so we can show everybody.
What's that?
Just draw a picture on a piece of paper. Here's the old one, here's the new one. It ain't gotta be the scale.
The scale?
Go ahead, sir.
My name's Mike Morgan. I got property on the airport there. I've always felt like the airport was a diamond, needed cutting, just needed to be cut the right way, and we'd have a real asset. And David's plan is the best thing I've heard so far. I really like what he's got. I might have an issue with the per lot charges, being my house is built right in the middle of two lots, but I think all that stuff can be worked out. And it sounds like it might make the people on Surf Road feel a lot better.
Thank you. Walt Dixon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, you know, with us dragging our feet on this airport master plan, I had a fellow that wanted to buy a piece of property there and put up a hangar and restore airplanes. He would have had 3 employees there, and these employees are paid good money, but we've lost that opportunity. The second thing I want to point out is that most of these people speaking tonight here are retired. The other day when I flew back from Atlanta to Tallahassee, there was a young man sitting in the plane. He had his captain bars on. He's the young pilot for Delta Airlines. He's from Sopchoppy, graduated from Wakulla High School. Well, he first got his interest in flying by taking flying lessons from Al Fitzgerald. Now, this guy's got a great career ahead of him. The same thing if we develop this airport, in conjunction probably with our school system, we can start maybe a program, aviation, where we can teach these young guys to begin flying so they can go on and have very successful careers in the airline like Clay and these other people have. To me, if we can create some jobs like that for our young people, because not everybody's going to go to college, we know this. This would be a great thing for this county if we could do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Shepard?
Good evening. Quality of my life. I had the best job in the world. And the best job in the world was flying around the world. I did it over 100 times. And the advantage of that job, I could live anywhere I wanted to. And I found Tarpine. I did it, I bought that place in 2000. I built a home there because I could live on an airport that I could build my hangar, I could build airplanes, and I invested in another property in there, and I built another house in there, and I now have 2 homes in there, and they both have hangars on them, and this is the way I want this whole thing to go forward as fast as we can. And as far as Dave's plan, I think that could be a possible way to go. And I do know that part of the master plan was to elevate the airport. I think it was 3 feet, and that may bring it to a better drainage problem that there is there. Anyway, thank you.
Dan Hinchey?
Thank you, Commissioners. I've lived in Tarpine for almost 12 years. I'm not a pilot. I'm not going to be a pilot. I bought there understanding I was moving into a fly-in neighborhood. I don't understand people, if you haven't lived someplace for over 50 years, which is now what the airport's age is, then I think you all moved in there understanding what you were getting into, and it's part of what you do. Just because you live there, not all of a sudden decide that no longer can those things exist. I think that we need to continue forward here. I know the tactic of dragging their feet, so we lose the permitting, so we lose the airport. Once that happens, it won't reopen. We all know that. I believe that Dave Edwards has come up with a great idea as far as how do we go from the $5 million plan, which really is never going to happen, but we have to have the master plan, to keeping the ball rolling and getting certification. So I support the airport. I support all the people who support it and those who don't, and I appreciate their positions, but we've all got to live with it. It's there, and it's always been there. Thank you.
Chris?
Hey, Commissioners, let me speak. How are we going to pay for this if we're losing our money into Panacea? I don't get it. You'd have to been at the last meeting to get that.
Just come sit up here and I'll sit in the audience.
Hey, look, I am so encouraged. Like Dan, I believe that once this goes away, if the airport was to go away, we'd never get it back. That's a fact. And I don't fly, and I haven't ever flied, but you know, some of you know that my dad took a flight out there not long ago, saved his life. But not only that, I have a guy that I work with, a colleague in Tampa, got caught in a storm coming here on his way to Atlanta. He's a pilot. He flew in there, saved his life. A lot of good work, Dave. I think that's a great idea you have there. I would...
I'm the one that told him to come up with the idea.
Great job. That is leadership right there. That's why you're taking my 2 minutes up, though. Yeah. Hey, the question I have, though, is the T hangars, which I don't actually get, but I would like to see any revenue we can come into the county to the county coffers as well. Do we not rent commercial dock space for commercial fishermen? So
have dock space.
We don't have a very good record of that. So
I'm just saying.
We have one lease, but
it's got to be the right lease.
We need to be careful with what business to go.
It has to only go to commercial fishing.
Who maintains the license in your plan, Dave?
We do. County does.
Hey, great plan, great job working together. I'm pretty sure when I walk out, I'm going to get struck by a car because obviously you ate the cookies and it's working.
Alan Pfeiffer?
Good evening, Commissioners. This changes a lot for me. I think Dave Edwards' plan it works for me. Something bothers me, and I know there's an undercurrent of there's a certain amount of elitism here. I hear from the other side, well, you're a hobbyist, or whether you're rich people, you're this. There's a place for everybody in the county, I would assume, including the people that moved here, some as far away from California. We have all types of facilities the county provides, and they cost the county. Tennis, baseball, boat ramps. I had docks. And is there an equestrian facility? There's something for everybody. Why not a public use airport that in fact can make money? And additionally, You know, you heard today the airport could be profitable and not a burden on taxpayers of Wakulla County. What you did not hear enough of was the airport's indirect economic contribution through tourism, eco-fishing, business access from people who located in the county due to the airport's availability. You heard some about the life safety and public aspects of the airport, whether it is contributing to national defense through occasional but consistent training by the armed forces, a base for forest fighting or urgent medevacs by helicopter. Wakulla Airport serves the citizens of Wakulla County and beyond. Let's not fight the way we're doing. The division that's involved in here makes me wonder if there's ulterior motives from some of the very few people that are really against this. Thank you very much for hearing it. The only question I have for Dave is, has this been vetted by DOT that it's an acceptable avenue?
We've had just limited conversation. There's a lot of details that have to be worked out on this.
But preliminarily, this is a workable
Yep,
path.
most definitely, most definitely.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Clay? There you go. Thank you. Nailed that one.
I believe it'd be easier if it's Smith or Jones. Thank you very much, Commissioners, for your time and energy on this, as well as all the issues that you tackle with for our county on our behalf. I would like to speak a couple things about the positive economic impact of the airport down there. I live right on the runway. I see the traffic in and out of the runway, and I can categorically tell you, in my opinion, that airport serves more to the outside community than it serves for the Tarpine community. I left North Florida, being a North Florida native, having watched that little airport from the time that I was about that big to the time that it is today. I left North Florida, spent 25 years as an airline pilot. I flew all over the world flying commercial jets. I've flown air ambulance, and I can tell you that small airports in small counties provide more life-saving than you can ever imagine. As a volunteer firefighter, I can attest to that. We see folks from Franklin County, we see folks from Wakulla County that are medevaced out of there, and as a pilot, there is no better place to go to land a helicopter to get a passenger out. You don't want to be in the middle of the street. You want to be at an airport because you know that it's all vetted, you know the approaches are in there, you know everything that you need to know about that airport and getting in and out. I would like to address one thing that Dave mentioned on his conversation. He said that mentioned that didn't want to be in the hangar business. I've rented an airplane hangar over in Perry because this airport doesn't accommodate an airplane that needs a bigger runway. And I can tell you that my dollars are going over to Perry every month, and they have a very viable thing. And my understanding is that part of the FDOT funding would be that they could, in fact, we could as a county acquire the existing hangars, and that's an immediate revenue generating device month after month after month, as I can attest to. So we should consider the possibility of incorporating a hangar acquisition as part of the thing, because that's money pressed into the county every single month for those things and for those hangars that are rented. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. John Pelham? And Steve, you're...
If I might, I'd like to give my time to...
All right. Steve?
Ironically enough, in the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield my time.
Bless your heart, Steve.
Thank you all, though, before I go, thank you all very much for taking the time, looking at this from all perspectives. Mr. Administrator David, thank you. You did a great job. I fully support you. But maybe some fine-tuning.
Wow, you and Bill agree with me one night. Wow.
All right, amongst ourselves, let's try to come out of this with some direction for David and John, and let's please try to keep the talking points to a minimum. Let's try to get to a conclusion. I like David's idea. Of course, anyway. I think that the only thing I wanted to comment on as far as the hangars go, I think businesses can handle. If somebody wants to build rental hangars there, bless their heart, they can make money out of it. Ralph, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I like it as well. I'd like to explore it. I didn't hear any major opposition to it tonight, so let's try to move
And I guess
forward.
if we do get direction, let's say we do get direction with David's idea, you could direct John to revise the master plan to reflect what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do that? Howard? Gary, I'm going to go last on you because I think I know what you're going to say. What do you think, Howard?
You know, I like the idea of, there's a couple of points that were put out that I think that the idea of airport expansion may be a little misleading. It's really airport improvement. And this runway is not getting much bigger, maybe shorter. I'm not quite sure where it ends up with the new configuration. But it really isn't, it is not becoming a commercial airport. So I think that concept needs to be really understood by everyone. And the idea of doing as little as possible that we can afford to keep our certification, I think is the road that we want to do. Is so whatever it takes to keep us current, certified, and keep that airport in the county, I'm on board for.
Okay, Richard?
I'm going to also say in agreement, I'm in agreement with David's plan. I think David's got a good plan as far as the private and public partnership. I want to also say that I'm in favor of the airport being there. I think it's an economic generator, not just for the Tarpine area, but for the area in general. There's a couple of people that fly in periodically. They fly in, they stay there, and they get local fishing guides. They stay in the motels, they eat in the local restaurants, and that's just a couple. But I live in Wakulla. I work in Franklin County below us, and one thing I've noticed from the working down there, Franklin County has 4 airports, and Wakulla has 1. And I think the one airport that we have, I think we need to do what we need to do to make sure that airport maintains its certification, and I'm supportive of it.
All right, before Jerry talks, you got at least 4 now. The direction I think that you got from the board is to revise the master plan to do as the minimal possible. Now, the fueling is not included in that minimal possible. That was part of David's idea because it wouldn't require staffing, and I think it would enhance the airport. Okay?
And I think those things should be options.
Okay.
I'm not for striking them or making sure they're...
We're not going to do that, is the main point. With the plan we have now has everything, the hangars and all that jazz, right? And all the additional land acquisitions.
I was going to suggest, Commissioners, we could, like Commissioner Kessler suggested, we could put those in as optional things for the future, and it still gives you the option to get outside funding for those.
Could we make it optional in the future, and right now just do what we talked about?
Yes.
I think that'd make everybody feel a lot better if the plan wasn't, well, this is, you guys have committed to do this at some point in the future.
The master plan doesn't commit you really to do anything, it's just your intent.
I'll let you, Dave, handle that. Go ahead, Jerry.
Basically, everybody knows my position on this. I think I would support a public-private airport. I think there's absolutely no demand out there other than just the local demand. We don't have industry down here. We probably don't have any future of industry. We don't have a really high-income retirement community around. So I would support the public-private, but I cannot support spending any of Wakulla County taxpayers' money on the airport, period.
Okay, David, you got clear direction? All right, meeting adjourned.
I wish I'd have thought about this with the wetlands issue.
I wish I'd have told you to talk.